So we're working on the wing, and the way this is designed takes two servos, I guess one for the inner flap, one for the outer flap or aileron. In my case, I think I'm gonna gang those two up to be aileron, elevator and aileron together. So how this is gonna go, it's gonna go something like this. So that servo is gonna sit in here something like that. And then the other servo looks like it's gonna sit in here in that kind of a fashion. I still have to figure out how I'm gonna route the wires, but sort of like that. So in your kit you get these brackets, and that's what's gonna be used to attach the servos to the skin. What I do like about the wing surface on this jet is that there is already, let's see if we can zoom in, there is a good piece of wood in there, or wood material for you to, there we go. So you can see this nice thick plywood, and this goes on the front as well as the back for you to attach the servo on, as well as on this side you can see just solid plywood all around. To secure the L bracket that's on here onto the servo, we're gonna use these M3s, and they are roughly, they're M3 by 6 millimeters. So M3 by 6. We're gonna use Loctite on those guys as always, because we don't want these to come off unless we explicitly want to take them off. A little bit of Loctite there, and then we just line it up and secure it. When you use a 6 millimeter, it fits very well, almost flush to the back of the mount right there. So one more thing here is that I'm using a standard servo, and when you try to mount it, you see that there's a bit of a gap there. And so what I'm using is just that piece of plywood right there, and that's gonna just get shoved underneath, and I'm gonna glue it to the skin, and then that way that's gonna secure the servo pretty well. And on the front side of it, it looks like it's, let's see, it looks pretty good, so you can see that there. So I don't think I'll need any sort of mount on here, but we'll see. Actually, no, that's not true. So on the front portion of the mount, you can see that only sort of that piece has something to screw onto, and the other hole right here, pretty much there's no wood to screw on. So that means I'm gonna have to put a plate just like the one in the back and the front here. And that's okay, because the jet comes with these covers that are supposed to go over, and you can see there's plenty of room in there under the cover for the servo to come up just a little bit. So we're gonna add a piece of wood in the front, piece of wood in the back, and then because the cover here is gonna hide that really well, and has plenty of wiggle room in there to play with. Surface prep. So we've scratched off the paint. Here's the first block of wood that's gonna go in there. I'm gonna glue it into that place, and then the second block of wood is gonna get glued on, just like that. First test fit. Let's make sure everything fits, and that looks good. So that's what we're looking at on the back side. That looks like a perfect fit, and on the front, this is what we look like. So pretty tight fit, looks good, I love it. So we're just gonna finalize this. So while I'm here working on getting the wiring of the servo, so that's the servo there, wiring has to come out here. I noticed that the light that sits at the tip tank comes out through a different hole. But I want to use a single connector. I don't have to connect multiple things. So what I did is I took my Dremel and drilled through, because there's a tube in there in which that light wire comes through. So I drilled it a hole, and so now I want to extend this wire so it comes out through here. So my grand total will be the 2 servo wires coming through out here, one for each flap, and then the light, and that way I can have one connector instead of multiple holes. So we're just gonna solder this in place, nothing fancy here. And when I solder, this is pretty quick. Just tin the wire just like that real fast. Okay, that's one tinned. I'm using a little bit of a giant soldered tip. There's no need for that, but that's just what I had lying around, and I have to be careful there that I don't overheat the wire and just cause the sheathing to melt, or the sleeving. So what I like to do is I have this 2 wire that I got from my power box wire, and I'm gonna match red to red, and then obviously brown to white. That's just my color coding scheme, and that seems to work well for me. So just quick solder, boom, done. One down, and then one to go. Let's just get that wire set correctly. Let's just get some solder on the iron. Done. Okay, so with that, we are almost ready. So I don't have my heat gun handy, but I'm gonna inspect those. Looks pretty good. So I'm just gonna cover that. Cigarette lighter. Shrink the heat, shrink down. And then all of this is gonna go into that. So I did use adhesive lined heat shrink, just because that stuff is gonna provide some more resistance to breaking the wire, because it's actually gonna glue itself to the covering of the wire. So we're done there, and we can now just pull this wire through. There we go, and rest easy, knowing that all of our connections are going to come through here. So we have the first wiring harness done. You can see it comes out through here, and that's a pretty short one. The connector is going to go on the end here. But for the second one, we need a go-get-'em wire. So there is a tiny slot right under here. It's very hard to show on camera, and that opens up to this area here. And so what I need is my go-get-'em wire. We're going to slide that in there. And you can see it comes out right through here. Let's zoom in. You can see the wire right there. We're gonna grab that, bring it out, and then feed our wire through and pull it all the way along. And the wire made it. So here we go. So we're just gonna work our way through and bring all the wiring out to the end right here. So test fitting everything looks great. So we have all my wires coming out right now. So we have the lights, this is the outer flap, and this is the inner flap right here. What I want to point out here is, and it's a minor detail, but I think it's important, which is that when you, at least when I do this, I want this connection hidden right in here. You don't want that to be stuck somewhere inside this area here, because when you want to replace this, you want to be able to just yank this out and really get access to it. So I'm gonna fold it up. I would have made it shorter, it would be nicer, but that's fine. I'm gonna fold it up and stow it right in here. That way, if I ever need to take this servo out, the connection that I need to touch is just opening up the hatch, and that's it. Perfect. Okay, so there we have it. So now once we secure our servo, my extension connection is right in here. Easy to replace that. There's plenty of coil in there. I can pull that servo out and service it. And this, on this end, is the length of wire that I'll have to work with for my adapter or my connection to the wing. So here's a auto flap servo, same story. There's a block on the back there, and is about half the size of a block on the front end. And those are just C8 in place for now. And I'm gonna drill through to secure the servo in place. And then you got your caps. So you get two and they're symmetric. So that's what's gonna go over the servo, just like that. To make sure that it's gonna sit just like that to hide that servo. And yep, so we're gonna go put the arm in there that's gonna actually move the servo and make sure that it clears the height that we have. I know from previously doing this guy that I had to shave down that arm, and the arm that I'm using is one of these guys that I just got from Amazon. So I had to pretty much shave down this top section and just leave that bottom hole for it to fit within there, and I suspect it's going to be the same thing on this side. So a little bit of a change. So I know for the servo that's in the spot right here, we used one of the blue linkages or blue servo arms, so one of these guys, but I think that's gonna have to change. And the reason is because these blue servo arms, I mean, the shortest hole is like right here, and if you look at that, that's a distance, it's almost 19 millimeters from the servo head. But the clearance that you get underneath one of these is pretty small. So, you know, you want that to be about 14 millimeters or so, because the servo is going to be somewhere in here. So what I found is a different 25T servo arm. I'm going to use these guys, but just cut down. So this is what it started as, and as you can see, I trimmed off a little piece, and this is what's left. And that end to end, so servo spline to the hole is about about 14-15 millimeters, and I think that should work better. So I'm gonna go back and change this guy, and the reason is if you can see that right here, it is pretty much maxed out, like almost right at the top, and I want to avoid that. So I think I've got to something that works. And so these are the 4 screws that hold the servo together, and those are just these RTL fasteners number 2 by 7/16. We'll see if I need to countersink these. I'm not so sure. It feels like this cover is a little tight, and that just goes over top of like servo like that. It feels a little tight around here, so I may have to countersink these and change those into something that actually is flush. But in terms of the clearance inside there, you can see that there is, there we go, there is some room for the linkage arm to be on the inside, so this being the outside and this being the inside, so there's room for that. So I think that you want to limit the length of this horn so that everything fits in there. So we're gonna mount this guy and keep going. So the servo and servo covers are done, and you can see I used about 4 or 5 screws to hold these down, to hold that cover down, and then similar here, I might add one more somewhere in here. The screws might be a little bit too big for this, but that's all I had, so that's what I'm gonna use to hold that down. And in terms of what we're looking at inside, that one looks really good because the linkage is gonna mount in between that arm and the servo. And this one is pretty tight. I think I'm gonna have to change that blue servo arm into one of the red ones, but otherwise good to go. Next thing that I'm gonna do is mount my flaps. So you can see there pre-drilled holes already in the wing, and we are gonna use some epoxy and get those in place.